Now on Money Talk 1010 AM, it's the Morgan Streetman Show. Morgan and Roxanne Wilder are discussing everything from world, national, and local issues to information from the unknown. And since Morgan's an attorney, there will probably be a little something from the law. Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Well, hello, gentlemen. Happy to be here with you on this Monday. And we have so many good stories to get into today. I have some personal ties to some of them. So
it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, for some people. I tell you, we got some. I mean, we want to take a quick look back at this Virginia stuff because I am just endlessly fascinated by what is going on with politics in Virginia. And, you know, it all started a few weeks ago when a photograph came out, basically of a picture of Governor Ralph Northam's yearbook from medical school. And there were a number of interesting things about these pictures and the text written there. There were 4 pictures on his yearbook page. 3 of them clearly depicted Northam. One of them depicts one person who's wearing what they call blackface, which is, you know, they've put shoe polish or something all over their face. So that's an old thing that they used to do. And it's kind of racist. It's making fun of black people. And has been done in a long time appropriately. I mean, I think Taco did it in the 80s or something. And then maybe Ted Danson did it in the 90s. But it wasn't considered appropriate when they did it. Now,
and somebody lost their job, their high-profile job, because of not understanding the historical significance of it. Megyn Kelly.
Yeah, you're right. Where she said that, hey, you know, she didn't think it was that big of a deal or something. And oh my God. Well, anyway, you go back to the yearbook, and here's the thing: I don't think it's Ralph Northam in blackface in that picture because there's another figure in that picture as well. And the reason that we basically know it's not Northam in blackface is the pants that the person in blackface is wearing also appear in another picture where Northam is in the picture and he's not the one wearing the pants. So unless he borrowed his buddy's pants, which, at least as far as I'm aware, almost should never happen, but maybe it does. I don't know.
So what do you think?
So I
think
think
the pants don't fit.
I think he's the guy standing right next to the guy in blackface. But guess how that guy's dressed?
Oh, that's not good.
He's dressed in a full KKK outfit with the white hood and everything, and he's standing there holding a beer. Now, of course, underneath that is a quote from Northam, which kind of makes you wonder just about the guy. And he says he understands there are more old lawyers than old drunks, so he's going to have another beer. I'm sorry, more old... Here I go again. More old drunks than old doctors. Here I'm just talking out without even thinking about what I'm saying. More old drunks than old doctors, so he's going to have another beer. So the guy was obviously a little bit of an animal, I would say, in medical school. And obviously he was drinking a good bit and, you know, dressing up in ways that I don't think are really considered acceptable. And you would think, and I thought last week, he's got to go. And in fact, I still think this is going to end up taking him down, but it's actually better for the Republicans if it doesn't. It's actually much better because it's the exact opposite of what the Democrats want to say they are. They want to say they're the party of anti-racism, when in reality, the Democrats are the party of racism. The Democrats are the party of slavery. The Democrats are the party of keeping people in economic hardship for votes. They want to keep poor people poor, and they want to keep them dependent on the government because that's how they get their votes. Democrats are very much in favor of abortion and Planned Parenthood. Where are most of these Planned Parenthood centers located? In the inner cities. I mean, you have to look at the history of Planned Parenthood with Margaret Sanger. The idea was we don't want black people having too many children. I mean, if you don't understand that, that's really important. That's where Planned Parenthood comes from. And I don't think it's any coincidence that this happened to Governor Ralph Northam. This information was released like about a couple of days after he went on the radio and described allowing somebody to make an abortion decision during labor. So they're already in labor having the baby, and they're not sure whether or not they want to keep the baby. So he said, here's what we would do. We would go ahead and deliver the baby. Then we would keep the baby warm and comfortable while the physician and the mother made a decision about whether or not to kill the baby.
You know, there are some people saying that this whole, picture thing is a camouflage for what he really said before all of this. They're trying to get people's mind away from the whole abortion thing.
I mean, this was out there. This picture, apparently, several people had this. It was known about. So why it wasn't widely publicized before now, I don't know. So maybe you're onto something there, Pat.
They were saying this was just going to be a smokescreen so the other thing would go away.
Well, maybe so. I don't, to me, both of them are inexcusable. Both of them are inexcusable, but they got a lot of problems going on in Virginia because the number 2 guy, the guy who, as of like a week ago, thought he was going to replace Northam when Northam resigned, this is a black gentleman named Justin Fairfax. Gentleman's probably the wrong word to use there because according to a couple of women, and these allegations seem at least as credible as the Christine Blasey Ford allegations, but according to a couple of different women, one of whom is a doctor, Dr. Vanessa Tyson out in California, and she said basically that Justin Fairfax sexually assaulted her at the 2004 DNC, Democratic National Committee Convention.
I believe there's another accuser coming out as well.
Yeah, there's this, and we don't know her name, and that's fine. We don't need to know her name, but she is accusing Fairfax of rape while they were students at Duke. And apparently she accuses him of also saying afterwards that the reason that he targeted her is because she had been raped before, and he knew she wouldn't say anything. I mean, this guy is the lieutenant governor. And by the way, apparently in the staff meeting when some of these allegations came to light, his response was not, we should believe all women. His response was, we can't even say it on the air. We can't say the words that he said, but basically, forget that lady. You can hopefully guess at what he actually said, but I'm trying to forget that lady is what he said in so many words. So this is the number 2 guy. Well, then what happens? Okay, well, he's not going to work then, and he's going to be forced out. But then the number 3 guy comes up, and this is the Secretary of State, Mark Herring, I believe is his name. And Attorney General Mark Herring. And he's admitted that in his past, he was wearing blackface. So far, the top 3 posts in Virginia, well, the top 2 and then the Attorney General, let's say, the governor dressed up in a Klan outfit and felt like that was one of the 4 pictures that he wanted to have in his yearbook. So, read into that if you want. Number 2, the lieutenant governor is now accused by multiple women of sexual assault. And then the Attorney General had to come out and get ahead of the scandal and say, you know what, I did some blackface in my days too. And I mean, what in the world is going on in Virginia politics? And these are all Democrats. Now, I posted something because to me, it's very obvious with the 2 accusers of Lieutenant Governor Fairfax are both African-American. Well, one of them's African-American. We don't know about the other one. But the one that we know about, Dr. Vanessa Tyson, is African-American. Now, did you see a bunch of Democrats coming out and saying that they believed her? I didn't. I saw a couple.
They did ask AOC as well. They followed her down a corridor. She was going somewhere, and a reporter asked her, but she said, I'm not aware of that situation. I'm paraphrasing, but said she didn't know anything about it.
Well, that's a convenient out when you don't want to make a comment. You say you don't know about something. I mean, we see that all the time, which, is pretty darn disingenuous. The truth is you don't want to make a comment, but here's what I'd say. Where are all the people out there, remember all those press conferences when Christine Blasey Ford came out? They wanted to be out in front. We haven't even heard from her, but I want to say I believe her. And, and just consider that. Now, just juxtapose that. Just talking about the same group of Democrats. You got a white lady coming forward, and they don't even need to hear her testimony, and they're coming out and they say they believe her. Now we got a black lady coming forward, and they don't believe her. Which party is the party of racism? You tell me. Look at the signs. Look at the signs. Who's dressing up in KKK outfits? Who's wearing black? It's all the Democrats. It's the Democrats. And it's tied in right with, institutionalized racism and Planned Parenthood and the attempt to keep the black population from overpopulating.
Do you think there's yearbooks out there that everyone's going through right now on either side of the fence?
I got to go. No,
I'm cool with all the pictures in my yearbook.
Yeah,
I just don't want anyone reading what we wrote to one another.
All those little notes?
Yes.
What were some of the KIT?
KIT.
Keep in touch. Did you actually KIT with all those people?
No.
I didn't KIT. I see them occasionally.
Well, now on Facebook, you can KIT with everyone.
Now you can KIT
That's
to your heart's
changed what
desire.
people write now and when they sign their yearbooks.
And we got a story on that to get into, too, after the break. About how many people are constantly online, and it's unbelievable. We also want to cover a local interest story here for you for something that just happened on Friday that's pretty darn interesting. We got a State of the Union recap. I mean, we're just going to cover some of it because we haven't talked to you since last week, and there was some stuff I wanted to talk to you about that happened in the State of the Union. We're also going to go through the Green New Deal that Ocasio-Cortez is supposedly putting forward, and all kinds of shenanigans last week about whether or not she said some certain things in a FAQ, frequently asked questions document, or not. And we're going to get into all that. And then would you believe in our Out There segment, we're going to talk about spontaneous human combustion. When we come back on the Morgan Streetman Show. And welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We're about to jump into our local interest segment here with something that we just saw on Friday, and it really caught my eye because I've run into this gentleman around about, and I always kind of enjoyed, when I've met him. He's a very gregarious person, very friendly, and I've seen him, I've watched him on the news. He's done stories on some of my clients and things before, and I've always kind of enjoyed his personality. Now, I only know him as a newsman, but that's Tampa Bay's own Reginald Roundtree. And if you didn't know, he was fired on Friday from WTSP Channel 10.
I love Reggie. I've worked with him in the past, and actually he used to be a police officer. My uncle knew him when my uncle was a homicide detective in Miami. Reggie was down there. So it's kind of a small world. But what happened, and Tegna is, of course, the parent company of Channel 10, and so they let him go. And so Reggie's saying that this is a situation that he's being discriminated against essentially because of age discrimination.
Yeah. He's 60 years old.
Right. And so I was at Tegna, and you did see a pattern at times of, and Reggie states in his case that they let X amount of people go over the age of 40 after a certain period of time, or during this window of time. Well, you look at the other stations in the market, and I don't look at ratings and revenue of all these other stations, but Channel 10 historically is not the strongest station. And my humble opinion of what makes a good television station in this market, Tampa Bay fans, Tampa Bay news watchers enjoy people who've been around for a while.
Yeah.
When you see Gail Guayardo, when you see Kelly Ring, when you see all of these people who are in your living room every night, that gives you a sense of comfort. And people don't take too kindly to change.
Yeah.
And Tegna's policy or approach, because maybe they have to keep their costs lower because maybe they're not getting the revenue some of these other higher rated stations are. And again, I don't look at this. This is just my sort of outsider view. But they do have sort of a carousel of people coming in and out. So it's not surprising that they did this. Now, the reason they gave for letting Reginald Roundtree go is because they say that they said there were some ethical issues related to him getting a particular interview because he was friends with this attorney. Right.
He was friends with the St. Pete attorney, John Trevena, and got the Michael Drake exclusive interview in jail, if you remember that. In fact, we talked about that on the show. It was a good interview. And they said, well, he got that only because he was friends with John Trevena, but like you said, I mean, that's how it works in this business.
Right.
I mean,
you're an attorney,
and
you're also a broadcaster. But if you want to get a scoop from someone, you've got to be in the community. You've got to have relationships in the community. So that all sounded a little bit strange.
Yeah.
And
he's apparently already filed too an age discrimination. I don't know if you saw that.
I did, and I saw one of the quotes in there. I'm paraphrasing, but one of the former news directors said something to the effect of, "I don't want to see these guys with ties on my news desks," saying he wanted a younger look. Well, the funny thing is that is sort of what they try to roll out. They do try to have a strong online presence, but when you have that, it's kind of interesting because you're obviously going for the younger audience, but it's a real challenge for television stations because the younger audience isn't watching nightly news or morning news.
Yeah.
So they're kind of,
they're shooting for the wrong market.
Right.
He's a young 60.
Yeah,
he looks. I'm surprised he was 60.
Yeah. Very, very. Anyway,
Reggie's a nice guy.
Yeah, he is a nice guy, and so we wish him only the best. And hopefully, I'm sure we'll see him. He's got to be. Someone else has got to pick him up. He's too talented, I would think. Well, switching to our short story segment, I had one here that I thought you would just love, Roxanne. I mean, love is, you would be interested in, let's say. And that is a study that just came out talking about how long teens are online.
Mm-hmm. The zombification of America. It's accelerating. 45% of teens are almost online constantly. That's crazy to think about. And as an adult, I'm not a teen, but I'm guilty of being on my phone quite a bit. You can feel your neck hurting. You can feel yourself being more distracted. So what do we do about it? It's really scary when you look at the teenage population, though, because another study provided information stating that 95% of teenagers in America are not getting enough sleep. That's a direct result of the phone time or the online time. And 95% are not getting enough exercise requirements. Again, what would you rather do? The choice being to be on your device rather than outside or at the gym or whatever it might be. So you've got two things that are contributing to long-term health problems. What's this generation going to have to deal with if they continue on this path? And it's not their fault. They've been handed devices since they were kids.
Right. That are
and
designed.
That's just part of their life. Yes.
And the devices and the social media and things are designed to be addicting.
Totally.
And so, it's like giving drugs to a kid and then saying, well, gosh, I can't believe they got addicted to it. Well, because you didn't protect them from it, parents. And one of the things I thought was interesting is that 17% of the responding teenagers, and they took a pretty big survey, but 17% of them said they feel that these social media platforms and other ways of communicating electronically actually harm relationships and result in less meaningful human interactions.
In other words, they know it's bad.
They can feel it, and they talk about it. Makes
but
it harder.
Can't stop.
Yeah, right. They can't, it's just like being a drug addict, isn't it? They can see what's going wrong, but they can't stop doing it.
Try to take a phone away from someone that age for a few hours, maybe 8 hours, 24 hours. Watch what happens.
Yeah,
I went through that as an experiment. It doesn't work.
Yeah,
it's so interesting because you think about, they say screen time is bad. So I always like to think, what do they mean by screen time? Does that include television? Or is it just related to the devices that you can hold in your hand and manipulate yourself, or a computer? And I think the handheld are the most seductive because we're getting this reward behavior, whatever it is. If our comfort is in gathering information, we're toggling through all the news stories. If we love the pictures on Instagram, or if we love a video game, you're getting that reward. It's in your hands and then it's in your brain. And I can see it with my own daughter. I think Doug and I did a great job of keeping her away from TV screens for a long time. And then around, past her 20 months maybe, we started letting her look at more pictures on the phones, videos on the phones, and I can see her brain. She's not smart enough or rational enough to know what it's doing to her. Whereas I know if I get lost in a rabbit hole on a news source that I've got to stop. But she doesn't feel that, and you can see sort of a physical reaction. The Silicon Valley parents are fully aware of this. They're now having babysitters sign contracts stating they will not have a phone or device out in front of their children because they know how bad they because they're the ones who designed them. Right.
Just like Steve Jobs said, he would never let his kids have an iPhone or an iPad. No. Absolutely, Pat. You got to look that up. Yeah, they know what they're doing. And you know what? The end of the study, it says, if you really want to know how to have a happy adolescence, put the phone down and do something that doesn't involve a screen. Go outside, do something like what we used to do when we were kids. Which didn't ever involve screens. This screen stuff is out of control, and the comparisons, and you see what other people are doing, and that's kids are talking about. It said, look, everybody looks perfect online, and it's providing a fake image of their lives, and this makes for a lot of discomfort. It makes for self-esteem issues because you look at other people and you think they're perfect, and they're really not. They're just putting forward an image that they want you to see that probably doesn't even match how they really feel about stuff.
It's crazy because we're talking about teens right now, but they're starting younger and younger. And I was in an elevator the other day and I saw a woman, and she's doing her best with her daughter, and she was probably less than 2 years old, and she's on watching videos in the elevator. And it's just so hard because just stand in the elevator, just have a conversation.
Right.
I told Pat this earlier this morning. Thank you to my sister-in-law. She was in town over the weekend. She spent so much time with my daughter outside, pointing at things in the sky, talking to her. And I feel like my daughter had leaps of vocabulary development in 2 days.
Yeah.
Because it's that new person coming in, talking one-on-one, not the screens. That's going to hinder the development.
That's right. Well, we learn from each other. I mean, we relate to each other. We don't relate to a non-human device that we hold in our hands.
That's a good point.
We're losing some fundamental aspects of humanity by stopping relating to each other like that. I mean, it's very sad. Very sad. And, of course, we're going to have to see what goes on. It kind of made me think of that Pokemon trend, if you remember a few years ago, where people are like, walking off the dock or walking off the pier because they're trying to get the Pokemon and they're just not paying attention. And it's like, hello, it's just a game. You need to wake up and get back to real life.
Smell the roses has never been more appropriate.
Yeah.
Stop and smell the roses.
Right.
Be in the moment.
Well, I tell you, we haven't talked about the State of the Union yet because it happened in between our last show and today. And I wanted to hit on a couple of things that Trump said in the State of the Union. Now, I want to get started. Pat, how much time do we have about until the next break? But, okay, we're getting a little close, so I'm not going to be able to necessarily get into the two quotes. We'll bring them back on the next break, and we'll cover them in the next segment. But, these were basically two parts of the State of the Union that I went through and pulled out because, in my opinion, they were the biggest applause lines of the night that President Trump got. And
your applause meters were bouncing when you heard those.
Oh, yeah. And one of them's pretty important, and that's the one on abortion, which we talked some about on Sarge's show, Wide Open, ahead of time, and talked about this, this late term, this maybe even post-birth abortion, which, by the way, I don't think you could argue that that's an abortion if it's post-birth. That's just what we call infanticide or killing a child. If the child's been born, then I believe there are still laws against murder in every state. I mean, I cannot even fathom how people think that that's appropriate. And they feel okay with that, or they want to affirm that or support that, or they think that if you don't agree with that you're somehow against women's rights. I mean, are you kidding me? What about the female babies that are born? I mean, nobody says that all these aborted babies are males. Give me a break. It's just absolutely stunning to me. And I love the way that President Trump dealt with it. And I think, one of the things I really like about him is his willingness to step out and say things that are true but aren't considered politically correct anymore. And, of course, we're going to get into that when we come back, because you got a statement at the end of his little talk on abortion there where he talks about how important these children are. And I think it's really powerful. We'll be right back. Morgan Streetman Show.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. I'm Roxanne Wilder. If you want to be part of the conversation, give us a call, 888-404-1010. And Pat, you said we had a caller who said Nancy Pelosi reminded him or her of... She must have watched Mean Girls in order to know how to run the Democratic Party.
Right, exactly. Mean Girls. I didn't see that, but it must be pretty
I saw Mean Girls.
Outrageous.
Lindsay Lohan.
I thought Mean Girls was I enjoyed it.
Oh, okay.
And way back then. I mean, now when I sound like a dadgum teeny bopper or something, but I thought it was a funny
Rachel McAdams,
movie.
Lindsay Lohan. Yeah, it was fun.
It was fun.
Cute movie.
Speaking of movies, I was watching a movie early Saturday morning, and it was about the corruption that goes on when you want to become president. It was like an old 1950s movie. And they had a guy that they found that came in during the Army and said something about the president candidacy, who was going to be the candidate for presidency. And what was crazy is that after they interviewed and talked to him in the basement, he went back and told his challenger, he said, oh, by the way, the guy, he died yesterday.
Whoa.
Wow.
He died yesterday. The guy that had that information, he died yesterday suddenly.
Oh, man.
And it was all this corrupt, and it was so ugly that one of the candidates that was going to win, he just backed out and endorsed somebody else. I don't know the name of the movie, but it was it had a bunch of big actors in it, but it was the way everything is lined up right now.
Well, it's like the Sarge said, Washington needs an enema. Washington needs an enema.
You've been there, you know.
Oh, it's too much buildup, too many years of buildup. All right, we'll stop talking about that now. But let's go to the State of the Union and talk about, let's run this clip that President Trump had to say about abortion. Now, before we run this, I want to tell you, I have taken 30 seconds of applause out of this clip just to make it so that we could get through it without, having to stretch into a second hour. So just keep in mind, there's an additional 30 seconds of applause that belongs in this clip that you won't hear.
Lawmakers in New York cheered with delight upon the passage of legislation that would allow a baby to be ripped from the mother's womb moments from birth. These are living, feeling, beautiful babies who will never get the chance to share their love and their dreams with the world. And then we had the case of the governor of Virginia, where he stated he would execute a baby after birth. To defend the dignity of every person, I am asking Congress to pass legislation to prohibit the late-term abortion of children who can feel pain in the mother's womb. Let us work together to build a culture that cherishes innocent life. And let us reaffirm a fundamental truth. All children, born and unborn, are made in the holy image of God.
Amen. I'll tell you what, can you believe a president saying something like that during the State of the Union? I mean, you talk about not being politically correct, but you know what he's doing? He's telling the truth. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's why people like this president, and certainly why I like him. There's a lot of things that he has done in his past
like. Sure.
that I don't like. And we know that. We've talked about that. I mean, we could go on a list, but what's the point at this point? I mean, he is our president, and I do like the way he's standing up for the unborn. I do like the way he's at least standing up for some of our American values, like being against socialism. And boy, this was a huge applause line, but not nearly as huge as the abortion. I had to carve some out of this one as well to make it fit. But what was interesting about this one is all the Democrats in white who couldn't stand it. Most of the people with Ocasio-Cortez's group that were all wearing white, they sat there just grimacing and looking at each other at this line like, oh, this is terrible. Of course, Nancy Pelosi had to get up and clap because she's at the level where it is at least expected that you're not an outright socialist when you're the leader of the Democrat Party. But let's listen to this line.
Here in the United States, we are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country. America was founded on liberty and independence, and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free, and we will stay free. Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
Now, can you believe like about a third of the room was upset with that line?
I was going to say that.
That's crazy.
Applauding.
How could you not applaud that America will never be a socialist country? That's part of our DNA. America stands for freedom. It doesn't stand for centralized market. We're not the Soviet Union.
The two comebacks for that I heard, and I can't remember if it was from AOC or I can't remember which congressperson it was from, but they said, well, what people need to understand about socialism is that it's not bad. Socialism is the public library. Socialism is the post office.
No.
And I laughed to myself because just the reference of, the socialism is they're trying to get it to catch on in the younger generation. And you just named two very antiquated institutions.
Right. Well, it's just socialism is for people who don't know history, because socialism has a long track record across the world, and it's a very bad track record. And so people who don't understand what's happened historically, like a lot of the young people who we have done a great disservice to by putting them in these government-run schools where they are not taught how to think. They are not taught logic, grammar, and rhetoric. They are instead taught 2,000 facts that they have to memorize so they can take a test and forget them as soon as possible after that. Thus, we're turning them out not having learned anything.
And you also have to teach to not have pride in our country. So once you've pushed that feeling down, then when you say to the masses, when you say, oh, but we're the only country that doesn't have socialized medicine, then the thought is, well, then we must have the only industrialized country. Well, we must have it if everyone else does. No. That's what makes us different.
Right. Well, and that's why people from other countries that do have socialized medicine oftentimes come to the U.S. for some of their medical care, because on the U.S. you can get it on demand if you pay for it. Whereas in Canada or the UK, you get put on a waiting list. So we do, people, the question is, do you want to be in charge of your own life? And I think that everybody should be in charge of their own lives as much as possible. And it should be as little of the nanny state as possible. But that's not the crew of Democrats that are up and coming right now in their party, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of our favorite subjects here on this show. And boy, last week was hilarious because last week she came out with her Green New Deal, she's calling it. And if you read the document they put out, it is so amateurish. It's like written as a stream of consciousness by a bunch of people who don't really know anything, who spend too much time on their cell phones looking at Facebook, reading headlines only or blurbs, and not actually engaging. And some of the stuff in it was pretty hilarious, including she's saying within 10 years we need to eliminate emissions from cows. Okay, because, by the way, cows put out more greenhouse gases than the cars. Okay, all that methane they're
a lot of burping.
Passing. That's right. So let's get rid of cows. She also wants to get rid of air travel because, that would really be great for our economy if you couldn't fly anywhere and you couldn't go do business somewhere, which is really easy in our country, which is a great thing about our country. You could just fly to any state on the same day and you show up in San Francisco or be down in Houston or New York or whatever.
The floating train tracks are fine. Yeah,
well, why not? Why didn't everybody just walk? That would save the most greenhouse gases of all. You want to go to Texas, start walking. But now this is the one that really got hit on in the media, and that is that she said that this deal is going to provide economic security, and I'm quoting now, economic security for all who are unable or unwilling to work. Keep being unwilling. Can you believe that? So we're going to provide economic security for people who are unwilling to work. Now, the interesting thing about this is they weren't sure what to do about this when people started saying, hey, wait a minute, are you really going to provide this to people who are unwilling to work? And so what did they do? They lied about it. Now, listen to this professor from Cornell, Professor Robert Hockett. He was on Tucker Carlson Today on Friday evening. Now, listen to what he said. These are blatant lies.
Why would we ever pay people who are, quote, unwilling to work?
We never would, right? And AOC has never said anything like that, right? I think you're referring to some sort of document that some doctored document that somebody other than us has been circulating.
Oh, I thought that came right from her. That was in the background or from her office.
Came from her website.
No. She's actually tweeted it out to laugh at it. If you look at her latest tweets, it seems that apparently some Republicans have put it out there. I don't know the details.
Good. Well, then thank you for correcting me. Because it seemed a little ridiculous. Almost as ridiculous as the idea that we're going to build enough light rail to make airplanes unnecessary, which I think actually is from the plan.
I don't know where you got that either, Tucker. I actually believe that you're actually on our side about this if you actually read the actual plan, right? There's nothing about getting rid of anything. It's about expanding menu options, right? There are many, many things we want to be able to do now in addition to what we already do. So where's the airplane disappearance coming from? I'm not really clear on where that originates.
Well, I could actually get it for you. This is
that would be great.
Frequently asked questions released by her office.
Yep.
And I'm quoting from it. Maybe this is fraudulent, in which case I hope you'll correct me.
Nope.
Mm-hmm. But it says that the Green New Deal would, and I'm quoting, totally overhaul transportation, and that would mean, quote, building out high-speed rail at a scale where air travel would stop becoming necessary. Hawaii Senator Mazie Hirono responded to that by saying that would be hard for Hawaii. So I don't think that's made up. The senator from Hawaii doesn't think it is.
It apparently is being misunderstood, right? We're really talking about expanding optionality here. We're not talking about getting rid of anything.
Liars. Lying. He's lying. Do you remember this? Isn't this a common pattern with Democrats? Do you remember when they were trying to get Obamacare through? Now, we're just going to play the short clip on this one, but we do have the full clip. We just don't have time for it. But listen to MIT professor Jonathan Gruber.
Lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to getting the thing to pass.
Okay, so it was critical to getting the Obamacare, Affordable Care Act to pass was a lack of transparency, and they were counting on the stupidity of the American voter. And we probably remember that because that was a news story a couple of 3-4 years ago. Well, doesn't that sound a lot like what Professor Robert Hockett's trying to do? He's sitting here gaslighting us, telling us it's something that came off her webpage, that, by the way, is documented in the Internet Archive, appears on PBS, okay, on the NPR webpage. It's got an actual link to this. So you can go out there and verify that this came from Ocasio-Cortez and her staff. In fact, the PDF was even written by her chief of staff, Saikat Chakrabarti, who also is a Nazi sympathizer. And you can look into that. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable, the people that we've got. And this is the leadership of the new Democrat Party? This is the people that you want to vote into office? a bunch of lying socialists who support Nazis and hate Jews? I mean, can you get any more un-American than that? It's combining all the worst qualities possible. Wait till we come back. We're going out there.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. It's time to go out there before we all spontaneously combust.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Pat George was worried about me at the end of that last segment. He thought I was going to demonstrate spontaneous human combustion.
Well, at least your head.
Well, what can I say? I get fired up when we start talking about socialists and communists and all their plans. I get really upset because that's not America.
Say the socialism started to move, like right now it's like a slow train coming out of the station. But if it really ever got up and running, can you ever stop that?
Well, I don't think so. And, it seems like that's where we're heading with the embrace of it by the younger generation. It's usually done like that. I mean, it's usually the younger generations that fall under the sway of socialism because they're not old enough, I guess, to think about what's happened in history and to see the repeating patterns. They're young, they're idealistic. They believe, why don't we all just work together and it'll be great? And they don't realize that that's not human nature. That's not human nature. People are going to freeload. They're going to be unable and unwilling to work, and they're going to want you to pay for it, and that doesn't work.
Out of AOC's camp, we've heard some fighting words in regards to even other Democrats within the party about, this means war. We're going after them because they're too conservative. So do you think this is the AOC movement, the socialism movement? Is it more like the Tea Party, and it's just a smaller group that aren't going to be able to get much legislation, or is it going to grow and get steam?
Well, no, I think it is gaining steam, and I think it's much different than the Tea Party movement, which was a movement of people.
I'm talking more size-wise.
No,
and,
I know,
effectiveness.
I know, and I agree with you though. But those were people who wanted to change through voting. What's interesting about the Ocasio-Cortez is the point you were making is that they're into, hey, if you don't agree with us, we'll get violent on you. You know what I mean? That's their game plan. That is pure socialism. Okay, Pat says move on. He says this is the Out There segment. And what are you doing? Spontaneous.
My ears just almost combusted. Okay.
Spontaneous human combustion. Have you ever heard of that, Pat George?
Yes, I have, but I don't know if I believe it.
Well, it's very interesting. It is when humans suddenly burst into a searing hot flame and left alone, their bodies burn fiercely until little but hot ashes remain. Although typically, like the hands and the legs usually don't get burned. And also, most of the room doesn't get burned. Now, a doctor that's been looking into this in England, Dr. Brian Ford, he thinks this is a very real phenomenon. And he says, by the way, that if you were to start spontaneously human combusting, the sensation would be absolutely agonizing in the extreme, but then you would probably go unconscious very quickly as you choked on the smoke from your own burning body. Now, there have been over 200 cases documented in the world, and I'm sure it's well more than that aren't even documented, but over 200 documented cases, including some here locally. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. At Annie Webb in Newport, England in 1980, she burned to death in her home. They only found a pair of legs, a piece of an arm, and her skull. And the tablecloth on the table right nearby where she burned was unscathed. So how did she burn up and nothing caught fire? How about something much more recently? Galway, Ireland. In 2010, a man's body was found cremated in his home, and they ruled out any source of external flame. And literally, the coroner put it down as spontaneous human combustion. That's just 8 years ago in Ireland. The coroner said that's what happened. Now, how about here in St. Petersburg? Because there was actually kind of a famous case. You could look it up in July 1951.
In St. Pete?
Here in St. Pete, Florida. Mary Reeser died at age 67, and when the firemen found her, and this is written up in the Times, the firemen couldn't understand why the rest of the room didn't catch on fire. There was minimal damage, smoke and flame damage, and it was all to the ceiling and upper walls. All the lower walls were left unscathed completely. And that's right here in St. Pete, Florida. Now, originally, they're trying to figure out, well, how does this happen? And a lot of people thought, well, it's got to be the alcoholics, right? They're smoking their cigarettes. They've been drinking all night. They fall asleep. The cigarette falls on them. They got so much alcohol coming out of their pores that, boom, they just go up in flames. But this has actually been tested, and human tissue soaked in alcohol, human fatty tissue, apparently doesn't burn like you would think it would. Okay, so they've been looking into this. Now, they say that this could be explained by something called the wick effect, which is pretty gross, but it's where the burning of a person's clothes that they're wearing is actually maintained by the liquefied fat coming off of their body. So once they get started on fire, they burn like a little candle until all the wax is burned off and nothing's left. Now, gosh, Lee, that sounds pretty weird. I mean, can you imagine walking into a room and seeing somebody, the wick effect going on? It's kind of gross. And they say that would explain the greasy brown stains that they find on the walls. It's kind of like a candle's been in the room burning all night and why nothing else caught on fire. But they've gone beyond this, and this Dr. Ford out of England, he says that he's done studies and done tests, and he actually says that he thinks that it's acetone, which, of course, is nail polish remover to most of us, but acetone, and apparently in your body, if you're very ill or if you've got significant organ problems, like you're a heavy drinker, an alcoholic, your body can actually start to produce excess acetone, and when that comes out of your pores, apparently, according to Dr. Ford, it is highly, highly flammable, and he thinks that's actually the culprit, that it's the nail polish remover that's coming out of your malfunctioning sick body, whether you're an alcoholic or not, and that's what's causing the spontaneous human combustion. Now, lest we leave you thinking that everyone agrees on spontaneous human combustion, we have to say that I think most scientists or respected scientists tend to poo-poo it, including one that I found out of Yale who says that it is absolutely laughable. But I don't understand what the alternative explanation is for people who are found with the whole middle part of their body burned up and just their legs and hands left.
Where'd they go?
They
were there.
And there are dozens of reported cases hundreds of reported cases. I could have given you all these examples of people who are talking about, we came in, our loved one was in the living room and we were upstairs sleeping and nobody even knew until we came down in the morning and we found the charred remains of our loved one. We didn't hear it. Nobody was screaming. We didn't smell it, etc. How does that happen? How does that happen? That's pretty out there, isn't it?
Do you think you'd have some signs that you had acetone poisoning before that happened?
Well, I guess if your nail polish is washing off early, you might be subject to, spontaneous human combustion. I don't know.
Why can't we kill two birds with one stone and find Bigfoot spontaneously combusted?
Bigfoot's too healthy. Bigfoot's not producing enough acetone in his body.
But his feet would remain.
But I think this is just absolutely fascinating. Folks, you got to go out there and pull that article on Mary Reeser from the July 1951 Times. If you just search Mary Reeser, you'll find a copy of the article. It makes for fascinating reading, and they've even got a picture of what they found. And as they say in there, firemen couldn't figure out how this happened and what caused it. Folks, thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And don't forget to exercise your brain at least once a week.